Hey guys, this is a lecture on section 10.3, which is graphing lines using the intercepts. So we're going to be graphing lines here, straight lines, and they're usually going to be diagonal. And the intercepts are actually the locations where your line intercepts the x-axis and the y-axis. Okay, so intercepts mean the locations where graph intercepts or intersects the x-axis and the y-axis. Okay. All right, so for the x-axis, the x-intercept, the way you find that one is you set the other variable equal to 0. So to find the x-intercept, you set y equal to 0, and that'll give you that point right there where the graph intercepts the x-axis. And then to find the y-intercept, you set x equal to 0. And once you set x equal to 0, that'll give you the point where the graph intercepts the y-axis. And the way you can use these for graphing lines is to graph a line, you only need 2 points. Okay? And if you find the x-intercept and the y-intercept, that gives you 2 points. And so then once you plot those, then you just draw a straight line between them and you're done. Okay? All right, so let's see an example of actually doing this. So they're not going to be giving you a graph like this. They're going to ask you to draw your own graph. And from this section, I used problems that were multiple choice. So hopefully they'll be pretty straightforward for you to graph. So there'll only be 4 choices to choose from, but one of them will be the correct graph. Okay, so let's do an example. Example, graph the linear equation. Graph the linear equation by finding and plotting its intercepts. By finding and plotting its intercepts. Okay, and here for number 1, we're going to be doing the linear equation y plus 1/3 x equals 2. So first of all, what does linear equation mean? Linear actually just means that the graph is a line, which you should already have known because of the title of the section. But looking at the word linear, it has the word line built right into it. Okay, so linear has the word line built into it. And so we're going to be graphing lines by finding and plotting the intercepts. So the basic idea is to find the x-intercept, we'll set y equal to 0. And then to find the y-intercept, we'll set x equal to 0. And then once we have those 2 points, we're going to plot those and draw a line between them. Okay? So let's start with the x-intercept. So to find an intercept, you always set the other variable equal to 0. Okay, so here, to find the x-intercept, we're going to set y equal to 0. And when I say set y equal to 0, I mean set y equal to 0 and then solve for x. Okay, so we take this equation here and we plug in 0 for y. Okay, so we're actually going to have 0 plus 1/3 x equals 2. Okay? And so that's how you find the x-intercept, well, part of it. And then here you have to solve for x. Okay? So to solve this, 0 plus any number is the number. So this just goes away. And then we need to get rid of the 1/3. So how do you get rid of 1/3? Well, the opposite of dividing by 3 is multiplying by 3. So we're actually going to multiply both sides by 3. Okay, so I'm going to multiply the left side and the right side by 3. So let me just write it up here. So we're going to multiply both sides by 3. And so on the left side, the 3 and the 1/3 are going to cancel out. And we just get x. And then on the right side, 2 times 3 is 6. So we get x equals 6. So what we just did here is we found the x-intercept. So this is the x-intercept. X equals 6. And know that when x equals 6, y has to equal 0. Right? Because we set y equal to 0. So here the x-intercept, is actually a point where x is 6 and y is 0. So it's the point 6, 0. Okay? So when we're doing our graph, we can actually go ahead and plot that x-intercept as a point. So let me go ahead and get started on our graph here. So we're going to be drawing our Cartesian coordinate system, or rectangular coordinate system. And what we've found so far is the x-intercept, where x equals 6 and y equals 0. So that's the point 6, 0. That's x, y. So we're going to go ahead and plot that point. X is 6 and y is 0. So 6 on the x-axis is going to go over to the right, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's our x-intercept. So that's 6, 0. Because y is 0, this is our x-intercept. X-intercept. Okay, and then the next thing we need to find is the y-intercept. And we find the y-intercept in a similar manner. It's just we set the other variable equal to 0. So for the x-intercept, we set y equal to 0. Now for the y-intercept, we set x equal to 0. Okay, and we're actually going to solve for y. So we take our original equation, y plus 1/3 x equals 2, and we plug in 0 for x. So we're going to get y plus 1/3 times 0 equals 2. Y plus 1/3 times 0 equals 2. All I did there was I plug in 0 for x. And any number times 0 is 0, so this 1/3 times 0 is just 0. So this one's actually easier to solve. So here we actually just get y equals 2. Okay, y equals 2. And that thing that we just found there, that's the y-coordinate of the y-intercept. So to find the y-intercept, x is going to be 0. We set x equal to 0. And then we found that y equals 2. So here our y-intercept is going to be 0, 2. So x is 0, y is 2. So to graph this line, we can now just graph this y-intercept as a point. So that's 0, 2. So x is 0 and y is 2. So that's going to go up on the y-axis by 2. So that's going to be right here. This is our y-intercept. Okay? And now that we've graphed those two intercepts, we know that the line has to pass through these 2 points. So we just go ahead and draw a straight line through these 2 points. And obviously you're not going to have to sketch it by hand if you don't want to, but it's a good skill to have anyway. And some people like to draw arrows on the end of the line, but they don't always do that in our book. Sometimes they do it, sometimes they don't. Okay? All right, and that y-intercept that we plotted there, that point was 0, 2. So let me label that. In fact, let me zoom in so you can see it a little bit better. So our y-intercept was 0, 2. X was 0, y was 2. Okay, cool. So that's the whole problem. And again, like I said, your homework for this section is going to be multiple choice. So you're going to have 4 different graphs, and only one of them is going to be the correct graph. All right, cool. So let me zoom back out, and we're going to go ahead and do another example. Okay, so example number 2. Actually, I zoomed out too far. Let me zoom in a little bit. So this example number 2 is going to be the same instructions. We're going to graph by finding the intercepts, but this one's going to be a little bit harder to find the intercepts because of the way it's set up. So for this one, we have y equals 5 over 4 times x minus 2. Y equals 5/4 x minus 2. Now for this problem, it does say to solve using the intercepts, so we do have to plot the intercepts. Sorry about that, that's my cat's litter robot. He has a robotic litter machine that's cleaning his litter right now, but it's right next to me here and it's really noisy. But anyway, basically we're going to be doing the same thing we did on the last problem. So let's start by finding the x-intercept. So for the x-intercept, we set the other variable, y equals 0. Okay, so plugging in here, we get 0 equals 5/4 x minus 2. Now what's harder about this one is we set y equal to 0, but now we have to solve for x, and there's more steps here. So for starters, to isolate x on the right side, we're going to have to get rid of the -2 by adding 2 to both sides. Okay, so we're going to add 2 to both sides. That's his litter machine still. It goes on forever. But it is a litter robot. It cleans his litter for me, so that's worth it. Okay, so anyway, adding 2 to both sides, we get 2 equals 5/4 x. 5/4 x. Okay? And then we need to finish isolating x. And I don't know if you remember how to solve an equation that has fractions, but basically if you multiply both sides by the reciprocal of this fraction, that's going to get rid of the 5/4. So the reciprocal of 5/4 is 4/5. So we're going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal, which is 4/5. Okay? And a lot of people hate fractions, so I figured I'd do one with fractions so that you're good for your homework. Okay, so what happens is when you multiply by the reciprocal, which means you flip it over, on the right side, the 5 on the top and the bottom and the 4 on the top and the bottom, those are both going to cancel out. So that's why you want to multiply by the reciprocal. So therefore on the right side we're just going to have x. And then on the left side, remember 2 is the same as 2 over 1. So we can rewrite 2 as 2 over 1. And then to multiply fractions, recall that you just multiply straight across. Okay, so here we're going to be multiplying these fractions straight across. And nothing's really going to cancel out here on the top and the bottom because 4, 2, and 5 don't have any common factors. So we're just going to go ahead and multiply straight across. So 4 times 2 is 8. And then on the bottom, 5 times 1 is 5. Okay? So we actually get our intercept is going to be x equals 8 over 5. Which is a little strange because I know we're used to having the intercepts from the last one. The intercepts were just integers, so they were counting numbers. But this time we have a fraction, so it's going to be a little bit harder to sketch it. But 8/5 is our intercept. Okay, and then how are we going to graph this? Well, it's kind of hard to graph 8 over 5, honestly. But you can always use a calculator to get an idea of what it is. So if you use a calculator, including the one that just comes with your computer, 8 divided by 5 is 1.6. So this is approximately well, this is actually equal to 1.6. Not approximately. It is 1.6. And so that's going to give us our x-intercept. Okay, so our x-intercept is going to be x is 1.6, and then y is 0. Because remember, for the x-intercept, you set the other variable y equal to 0. Okay? And yeah, that's kind of hard to graph, 1.6 comma 0. But fortunately, it's multiple choice from this section, so you'll be able to tell which graph is correct by looking at them. So for here, we go ahead and sketch a graph. And it doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to get the basic idea down. Since it's going to be multiple choice, that way you can choose the one that looks correct when you're doing your homework. Okay, so x is 1.6 and y is 0. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So x is 1.6, so here's 1, here's 2 on the x-axis, and x is 1.6, which is right about there. Just a little bit more than halfway between 1 and 2. So that right there is our x-intercept. 1.6, comma 0. Okay, and then to finish this, we still have to find the y-intercept. So let's go ahead and find the y-intercept. So to find the y-intercept, we're going to set the other variable equal to 0. So this time we're going to set x equal to 0. Okay, so y-intercept, we set x equal to 0. Which is actually going to be a lot easier to find in this problem. Because plugging in 0 for x, this whole 5/4 is going to go away. So we have y equals 5/4 times 0 minus 2. Y equals 5/4 times 0 minus 2. And remember that any number times 0 is just 0. So this first term on the right side is just going to become 0. So that just goes away. So we actually just end up with y equals negative 2. And since it's the y-intercept, x is 0. Okay, so our y-intercept is going to be x is 0 and y is negative 2. So 0 comma negative 2. Okay, so let's go ahead and graph this. So x is 0 and y is negative 2, so I'm going to be going down 2 on the y-axis. So here's negative 1, here's negative 2. And then our y-intercept is going to be right there. Okay, so that's going to be our y-intercept, which is 0, -2. All right, and then for our graph, we just go ahead and sketch a straight line. So we draw a straight line through these 2 points. And remember, it's just a sketch, doesn't have to be perfect. Because it's going to be multiple choice anyway. All right, and then, if you look at the problem, I don't have it on the computer here, but if you look at these problems like this, even though it's hard to graph 1.6, 0, it's still easy to tell which graph is correct. And remember that you can actually zoom in on the graph by clicking the magnifying glass with the plus symbol. So you can use that to zoom in and figure out which one's the right graph. But because this section is multiple choice, hopefully the graphing part won't be too hard. Okay.